Hello everyone, my name is Eugeniusz Romer and today we are at a very special place. We are at the Institute for Western Affairs in Poznań, and I have a very special guest who is Wolfgang Münchau, the author of the book Kaput, The End of the German Miracle. This book was published by the publishing house Krzeszwity in Poland. I strongly recommend to our viewers to take a look at this book. And you are not only the author of this book, but also you are a co-founder and the director of Euro Intelligence media outlet. So hello, sir. Warm welcome in Poland, in Poznań.
Thank you for having me.
So this book is obviously about the German economy. And recently President Trump, he hit whole world, but I think mostly Europe and Germany and European car and German car producers by his tariffs. So how profoundly actually would it influence the German economy, which is strongly dependent on American markets, especially if it comes to cars?
Oh, the impact will be profound because the German economy has been relying on exporting to the rest of the world. But it isn't just exporting. Germany exports more than it imports. So Germany has been relying on export surpluses. And this is a different category. And this model worked in the past. It worked very well. But it only works if other people, Americans, import more than they export. And if America no longer does that, there isn't anyone else in the world who can absorb these export surpluses. China used to. There was a time when Germany had a surplus with China. Those times are gone. China has reversed this. So Germany hasn't got, it has export surpluses with some countries in Europe, but this is not big enough to sustain the German economic model. So this is going to be a very severe impact. It's the tariffs on Germany, on German cars. It's the tariffs on German steel. But it's also the tariffs on China, because German companies use a lot of components made in China. So the impact that Germany will have on this entire tariff package will be profound.
So many people obviously know it in Germany, but do you think that the Germans, they want to change completely their economic model, or maybe they want to change the items they are actually exporting? So we heard that Germany is going to get rid of so-called Schuldenbremse, the debt blockade, which is in the constitution. And also the Germans, they say they want to invest a lot of money into the defense sector, defense industry. So Rheinmetall, this company is already worth more than Volkswagen, the main German car producer. So do you think that the Germans are now going to sell arms instead of cars?
No, I don't believe that. I mean, to answer the first question is, I don't think the Germans want to change the model. In countries, I've never seen a country that ever wanted to change its model. If you look at the election campaign that just finished, there hasn't been a single politician arguing to change the model. Nobody wants to change the model. The government that's now been formed by the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats under the leadership of Friedrich Merz, that it doesn't want to change the model. They have very small reforms, not even reforms. There's some tax breaks. This is all about taxes. This is not a reform. So no, there isn't. This model is the same as it was, and it loses attractiveness because the world is different, both in terms of their willingness to import German goods, but also in terms of the technology. The technology has changed. And a lot of things that Germany makes is no longer competitive in the world and desirable in the world. That's the shift that we've seen. And I don't think there is much willingness to absorb. You mentioned the debt brake, the fiscal rule. And indeed, they've changed it. And the one big change, or they've made two changes. They've, things that I mentioned also in my book is they're now investing. They have a fund for investment. And that's a good thing. So this will at least take care of a small problem of the German economy, which is that they're underinvesting in public infrastructure. And that is a good thing. And they are also now spending more money on defense, which I also think is a good thing. But we should also be careful in trying to sort of put this into perspective. German industry, the value added of industry in the economy in Germany is about 27%. How big is defense spending as a part of GDP? Maybe 2%, 3%? So if it goes up from 2% to 3%, just take these numbers. Not all the money will go to Rheinmetall, right? So they will actually have to do things. They'll actually have to import arms from the United States, like satellite, AI, artificial intelligence powered satellite technology, electronic warfare. There's a lot of stuff that Germany needs that it doesn't make. Rheinmetall is a very successful company. What do they make? They make tanks and bullets and ammunition. They're very good at what they're doing, but their share price has rocketed. But it's not a company, I would say, on which Germany can build a model. And I don't think it is at all realistic to expect that as the car industry is declining, the defense industry will take over from the car industry, because they both face the same problem. I mean, Germany has not invented AI. It's catching up on AI. I mean, really slow catching up on AI. Germany is not in the vanguard of digital technologies and digital services. Germany is certainly not in the vanguard of software development or even cyber warfare. So the question is, I struggle to see what kind of industrial model that would be that Germany can sort of develop or sort of diversify into. There will be some, tanks, armored cars, and the high end of SUVs have some similarities, but I wouldn't exaggerate this.
Actually, Armin Paperger, he said he wants to buy some factories of Volkswagen, for example, in Dresden, right, to build tanks instead of cars. So do you think this is possible? And also we observe a strong pressure within the EU to actually spend money on European arms, give it to European defense industry instead of spending them in America. I think Donald Trump and his behavior actually only helps in this direction. So do you think that there's going to be a shift towards defense industry?
But look, the fund is 150 billion over, I don't know how many years, 5 years, something like that. Like 30 billion a year. What is the GDP of the EU, which is, is it 20 trillion, 18, 16, 17, 18 trillion euros? This is a noise factor in the statistics. It's not like when you're talking about 2%, 3%, this isn't even a decimal point. So we have to be very clear about what the EU can do and what this is not the big money. The big money, I mean, what the EU fund will do, it will establish two important principles. It will maybe give money to countries that are not spending much money on defense, like smaller countries. And it will establish an important principle. And I think that's maybe the most important thing about it. Namely that defense should not be bought centrally, but it should be procured jointly. And I think that might be a step towards joint defense procurement. But we're talking at a project as long lasting or as long term as the single market. This is like a 20, 30-year project to get European defense on sort of a proper European integrated level. It's a very, very long process. And until then, we will remain very dependent on the United States because we don't have all the technologies that we would need for independence. We don't have the capacities. And yes, Rheinmetall will happily take over a car factory, but they can build tanks. But we need more things than just tanks. So it's a very complicated task that is ahead. It's easy to talk about defense, especially I'm not a defense expert, So economists like to talk about defense as though it's something to do with, it's a spreadsheet war. I spend 3% on GDP, and I win the war because you only spend 2.5% on GDP. That's not how it works. In reality, I know enough about defense to say that this is not how it works. So I think we should be modest in our goals. But the idea that, the car industry, if you think about the car industry in Germany, Germany invented the car in the 19th century. This was the foundation of an industry that lasted for 120, 140 years.
But you write in your book that this is actually coming to an end. And you do it in a very, let's say, meaningful way, because you said that actually German cars are cars with computers attached to them. And companies like Tesla or Chinese companies, they actually make computers on wheels. So this is the difference, showing that the German economy is not innovative as we thought it is. And you mentioned many fields like AI or software development and so on. So why is it so? Why are the Germans actually not innovative? Well, Germany is the richest country in Europe, actually. So German companies, they have or had money for investments. So why they didn't decide to actually invest them in the technologies of the future?
Because they made misjudgments about the technology of the future. I remember, and I saw citing stories going way back into the 90s. In fact, there were misjudgments already made in the 1980s when Germany was very, very strong relative to the rest of the world, where people misjudged the whole advent of the digital revolution. In the 70s, Germany was actually ahead of others, because Germany recognized in the 70s that they needed to invest in optical fiber and modern infrastructure, telecommunications infrastructure. And they had a very long-term plan, like a 50-year plan to do this. But Helmut Kohl, when he came to power in the 1980s, he stopped it. And that was sort of the first misjudgment. He bet on the analog television. He wanted high-definition television. That was sort of his game. He thought it was like a product that everybody would like. You could see your football in high definition. And that was his idea, and Mitterrand agreed. So they had this whole thing about high-definition television. Now, this wasn't just a venture that failed. It did fail. But it also ended this digital investment, because that was sort of a thing that they started in the 70s, and they stopped this in the 1980s. In the 1990s, I remember German companies, car companies, electronics companies, were still, were heavily invested in, the car companies and the diesel technology, which they perfected, was sort of their golden age in terms of, the technical development. The electronics companies, I remember I was citing an example of Siemens at the time, when they invested in an analog telephone exchange. And it was a fantastic telephone exchange. It was the best analog signal that anyone ever had. It was made very clear to them.
A new digital era was coming, actually.
But elsewhere in the world, a digital era was coming. And digital was clunky in the beginning. The first generation of digital wasn't good. The quality of telephony wasn't actually that good. It had some other advantages. It had delivered other services, as digital can, and that people didn't, as people now know, but not at the time. It was not so clear at the time. And Germany made the national, a national choice not to invest in this, because they felt they had their own telephony. There's this joke that I cited and that others have cited before me. I lay no claim to have invented it, but there was or to have cited it the first time. There was a famous meeting in the post committee of the Bundestag, the parliament, when a presentation was made to the committee about email, the future communications, and and one member stood up and said, "Look, we don't need email in Germany. We have a well-functioning telegraph service." And they had no idea what email would do, and the idea that the telegraph service would be enough. And that they didn't see the potential of digital at all, and they were very much set. And this is the way the German society works, and it's probably different from the way Polish society works.
Yeah, I think it's definitely totally different, because when you go to Germany or you would try to pay by card, actually, that's very hard in many places because everyone is expecting you to pay in cash, right? And here in Poland, when you go to a store and when you pick up some cash, they are actually very confused. Like, why don't you want to pay by card? So this shows the difference.
It's even worse than you say. There are many shops that accept cards, but they don't accept the card that you have because they have their own national card. And that's not compatible with any of the credit cards or debit cards that we have, like Visa or MasterCard or American Express. You may find very difficult to sell. But the fundamental thing, when you're going back to your questions on why did Germany not get this, and this is kind of probably the key question. This is a society that works on consensus. So in Germany, it's the government, industry, they all kind of agree, or that they all try to get agreement. This is something that is important in Germany, that they have consensus on everything. And if they're making a wrong decision, it means they all make the wrong decisions.
So everybody accepts that.
Everybody does it. And that's what happened here. They got this wrong. And it's not, in life, people get wrong. I would have gotten things wrong as well. But, this was a case where this mistake, this misjudgment was institutionalized. And it went on all the way until very recently. When Angela Merkel famously said in 2013, the internet is new territory. That was 2013. I think was it the iPhone 6 or iPhone?
It was in the 90s, right? It was in the 90s.
That's right. No, they have mobile phones. They had computers. It's not like that they don't have it, but the culture has never accepted this. One of the best-selling books in Germany is by an author who writes book against the internet, against the use of internet.
Well, where parents should not give internet to their children.
That's right. But also where schools should not. It's not about mobile phones in classrooms. This is not what this is about. This is about whether the school should teach skills like computing studies and programming, and whether they should teach digital skills. And that book argued, no, you should not teach this at all. And they compare this with drug. You're not teaching drug use. So why should you teach? For them, the internet, the modern digital technology is like the devil. It is something that is to be avoided at all costs, and children should be protected from it. That's the general. Apart from the fact that this is not going to happen, and children decide for themselves. In the end, everywhere in the world, of course, children decide what they want. Parents, as a parent myself, we have been quite powerless to stop this. But it is the technology of the 21st century, and Germany has been sort of kicking and screaming into this era, and they underestimated when they realized, like the car industry, when they realized it was delayed, they tried to integrate. That was the point. They always said we are very good at integrating digital into the analog world. But this is not what the game is anymore. It's not about integrating the digital into the analog world. The next generation of cars is a digital device. It has some wheels around, it has an engine.
Sure.
But it's not fundamentally an analog product, an analog era product anymore. You don't need a sophisticated engine for an electric car. Performance is based on other parameters like software. And in the world of software, you don't have patents. This is another misjudgment. The Germans always secured their leadership through patents and regulation.
So in general rankings of the most innovative countries, actually, Germany is very high because of the patents, but they are not the latest in sectors of industry, right? So I think many countries, especially we in Poland, we look with a bit of envy towards Germany when you say about unity, national unity, and the process of decision making that everyone agrees, and there is no such big argument as in other countries, like in Poland we sometimes observe. So now it seems that the Germans actually agreed that they want to spend more money on infrastructure. It's €500 billion, which are going to be spent by the new coalition. And also after they finished the coalition talks, the CDU and SPD, they also declared they eventually finally want to appoint the Minister of Digitalization. So do you think that this is something that Germans actually they perceived they made a mistake and they collectively want to go into a different direction?
Oh, I have no doubt that they will. I mean, British Mass is serious about it. So they will catch up on digitalization. I mean, in the sense, I was citing some examples about, telephone networks, about, mobile communications being behind the times. They will make the investments. I'm pretty confident that this is something that they will do. But look, I mean, this is Germany trying to catch up with, Poland, basically, because you're better. You have a better network than Germany. So, I mean, this is not, what leadership is made of. The leadership, the problem that Germany has, and is not going to be fixed by the infrastructure investment. The problem that Germany has is that it cannot mobilize capital, private investment, for new generation of companies. Germany can only mobilize capital if it goes for old companies and for sort of existing companies in networks. Germany has lots of networks, like various institutes that promote technological research. The famous Fraunhofer Institute, the Max Planck Institutes, university institutes. They all work together with industry. This is a great network.
But how about startups?
They're not part of any network, and and that's the problem. They don't get the money, and they get startup funding. There is a startup industry too, but the way the German capital market is dysfunctional, there is no way for these companies to get to the stock market, or only very, very few. A Google would not have succeeded in Germany. Not because of the product, it would not have succeeded because the German capital market infrastructure would not have allowed them to do what they did. And that's ultimately, where the problem lies, and that's not going to be fixed by public sector investment. So I say great, they need to do this. Germany is really lagging behind on public sector infrastructure. But to fix the problem, if you want to become a tech leader in the world, I mean, America's infrastructure isn't all that great either. I mean, it's not like telephone, mobile networks are great everywhere.
Actually, internet is very expensive in America. It's way more expensive than in Europe.
So we shouldn't confuse our public sector infrastructure with our innovative. Think France. I mean, France has probably one of the best infrastructures of any country in the world, in terms of, internet, 5G internet, and accessibility, great train service. So in terms of infrastructure, Paris and France in general is second to none. But France is not an innovative country in terms of its industrial innovation. And, Germany is at least plugging a gap here. But this is not going to address the problem.
And you also mentioned China, that actually China was one of the main markets for German companies. But actually the Chinese, they also, they wanted actually to replicate the economic model of Germany. So they want to sell, they want to export, and they want to export not only half products, but the high value-added products. And now Donald Trump is imposing enormously big tariffs on Chinese exports. So many economists, they fear that the Chinese companies are going to flood Europe with their products. So do you think this is also something that is going to be a serious threat for Germany? Because the European Commission actually imposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, but Germany, because of this dependence on Chinese market, voted against. So but on the other hand, the Germans are selling cars. So how China actually influences the future of German economy?
I think China's role is very important. I don't think China will do what you suggest. China is not going to flood the market with cheap cars. China is going to, what I think is going to happen with the Chinese electric cars is the EU will probably not have tariffs on China, but China will raise the price, so that they're not undercut the Europeans. Because cars in Europe are very expensive. I mean, cars in Europe cost about twice as much as they cost elsewhere in the world. So we are producing, we're really taxing consumers in Europe with the cars. And that's something that's been happening. But China is no longer the China that it was 20 years ago. Now, China is a very successful company. It's an innovative company. People are still thinking the Chinese are imitators. That's no longer the case. The Chinese are ahead of us in the technological developments in many, many sectors. Not in pharmaceuticals, but in many, many, many sectors are they ahead of us. So the danger that I see from China is not on price; it is on quality. There was recently. I mean, it's not in my book, but just happened recently. A German magazine did a comparison test between the high-end SUV from BMW or Mercedes and a Chinese from BYD, and they tested the navigation systems and the automatic driving, the parking systems. The Chinese car was able to find the tiniest of parking spaces.
So that's something unimaginable for the Germans, right?
The German car didn't find the parking lot, the parking space. So you could see that there are like generations apart. And that's to do with software development, to do with regulation. And that's where I see this car isn't going to be flooding the European market. This car is just competing head-on with the upper end of the European market.
So this is something that's hardly to be imagined in Europe, that the Chinese producers are going to beat us in technology. But if we mention China, we should also mention the term fence sitting, which is also attributed in the media to Germany. The Germans for many years, they were fence sitting between the US and between China, because both markets were very important for them. And in the current geopolitical situation, what do you think? Are the Germans going to decide which side to pick? Because the Americans are definitely, they are at the trade war with China, and American market is still very important for the Germans, but also Americans provide security for Europe.
Indeed, and that is ultimately the problem. I mean, the fence-setting approach of Germany was never sustainable, because you can, if America guarantees you security and you're not spending as much as they do, and you haven't then made the investments into security, what can you do when America says no to China? So we can basically say, okay, we'll deal with China anyway and have a conflict with America. Well, then we'll have to pay for our own security. Maybe that's where it is heading. But there are also time inconsistencies. Europe will possibly become independent in defense. As this is possible, let's just say it's a legitimate goal. Whether it's a realistic goal is another matter, but certainly it's a legitimate to say we want to be independent in defense. But if you pursue this goal, this will take 10, 20 years. This is a very long term, because defense systems take a long time to develop. Remember the Eurofighter? This was like a project for the ages. Like any fighter aircraft is a...
I think the European tank is going to be ready in 2040, so
yeah,
it's out of time.
These are the kind of time frames you're dealing with. So if you want to shift your dependence on the United States, you ask the defense ministry. I'm not a defense expert, but if you ask the defense ministry, they're saying we have a lot of cooperation with America. This isn't just something we buy off the shelf. There are about 7 or 8 countries developing the F-35. There's a lot of our input going into this, and this isn't just something we can just switch. We can't just tick it off the list and buy another one. This is not like a mail order shopping experience, and therefore these things can be done. But it will take a very long time, many strategic decisions. It's not particularly about spending a lot of money now, but these are commitments that societies, governments have to give, that need to be honored by their successors. So this is a major strategic choice. And that's why the fence-setting strategy doesn't work. Germany is, it's found the limits to this under Trump. But when I finished the book in July last year, Trump had not yet been elected, and they looked at it for a while that he wouldn't get elected, because it looked pretty strong in the summer but in the early days Kamala Harris looked very strong, and so history might have turned out differently, but I said it was not sustainable. It's not sustainable because of Trump. It's sustainable in the sense that what is not sustainable has to end at some point. Now it ended because of Trump, but it might have ended in other ways.
So if we are talking about the pillars of German economy, which have they have already broke some of them. So we also point at the Russian gas, which was cheap for the Germans, and Germany and Russia were co-developing projects like Nord Stream pipelines. So do you think that this is possible, that actually the gas will flow again to Germany? Because many media outlets like Bild or iStories or Financial Times that you used to work for, they report that the Americans are interested in buying out this infrastructure and letting the gas flow to Europe again. And also some heads of German and French companies, energy companies, they speak openly that they want to buy Russian gas when peace is achieved or ceasefire is achieved in Ukraine. Maybe it won't be as big volume as it was before the war, but still, I think this is something that is going to enrich Russia, and this is something that worries us maybe in Poland, but also people in Germany may also be afraid. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing these stories too. I think I think you're right. It will not return to the pre-war situation. I think one has to distinguish between that situation. I mean, it has to remember Germany got 60% of its gas from Russia before the war, and it was set to get more as the Nord Stream 2 pipeline opened. That would have doubled the capacity, the throughput. I mean, it would have basically made Germany totally dependent on Russian gas. We're not in that scenario now. It's also a different scenario now that America wants to get in on the act. It's a classic American move. I mean, this thing isn't owned by America. This is not like America can just grab the infrastructure. The infrastructure is owned by, the companies. It goes through sovereign territory of Germany and Denmark and other places. So one has to be clear about, what this is. And I think any agreement that Germany would have post-war would have to be done in consultation with all the Europeans. This was different before. The German gas diplomacy of Gerhard Schröder and Angela Merkel was not done in consultation. This was a bilateral deal between Germany and Russia. And it created a lot of hostilities, rightly so. I always was on the Polish side of the argument. I remember writing about this 10 years ago. And for most of the last decade, because Germany and in Germany, nobody saw this coming. If you talked about Germany, about gas, they said, but we need the gas. There was no sort of concern that anybody had sort of legitimate security.
I think the school of thinking was, if we are going to buy gas from Russia, we are also paying them money, right? So they need money to develop their country. So why would they destroy this deal, right?
Yeah, no, I think there was a lot of arrogance about it, and and I think that was really even worse, a complete sort of a negation that Poland had legitimate security interests. There was no thinking in Germany that such a thing even existed, because they felt that we were living in the post-war, in a genuinely post-war era, and that security is really a very low priority in life. Germany divested from its security, and the idea that Germany can't get gas because of somebody else's security interest was something that German society at the time would not accept. Another case where they made a misjudgment. It was, as I was saying about the cars and the digital industry, this was another national misjudgment. Everybody made that misjudgment. It's not like that 40% were saying, okay, I disagree with that position. No, everybody was behind it, except the Green Party. But they had different reasons back in those days. It wasn't Russia. The Green Party had never had a big issue with Russia. It was the fact that they hate gas. It was the product, not the supplier. And later, then that turned into a geopolitical thing for them. But it's ultimately it was an issue they didn't want, because they felt that gas would be a competitor to renewable energies, and they wanted a renewable strategy. So they opposed the pipeline for their energy policy reasons.
Yeah, and I also think that Germany started to decrease its reliance on nuclear energy after the Fukushima catastrophe. So do you think that somehow the Germans may reopen their nuclear plants because of the current geopolitical and economical situation?
It's difficult to see. I mean, I used to say under no circumstances, because the way Germany works, if you close down a nuclear power station, and you wanted to reopen it, it would probably take 10 to 15 years, because the whole process of creating nuclear power station in Germany is subject to a lot of legal procedures, and these procedures would typically take that long. And so there would have to be, anybody can sue and would get time, and there would be also, the court would then ask for time for a judgment to be made, for a report to be written. This thing can go on and on. Then you have appeals procedures and all that. So, Germany is not fast. Not fast at all. The country is slow in terms of these things. And even the party most in favor of nuclear power, the CDU, which is Friedrich Merz's party, have essentially not brought this issue up again. They talked about this in their most recent coalition agreement, but they weren't talking about nuclear power. They're talking about the next generation, about nuclear fusion, which is a technology that's a very long distance away, and it may never happen. So they basically said they want to be open to that technology and continue existing research in this, and fund existing research in that technology. But they're not in favor of reverting to nuclear energy, no. So I would think this is very unlikely. That need to change the constitution. And that's going to be very difficult.
And at the beginning of our interview, you said that you don't actually dare to give any suggestions how the new economic model of Germany would look like, because it's a very hard issue. So if Germany, I don't know if it's destiny to fall economically somehow, or decrease in the world, let's say, ranking, how do you think it might influence Poland? Because we are highly dependent also on German economy. We are in the region which is called Greater Poland, and Volkswagen is the main employer here. I think dozens of people work actually at the factories of Volkswagen, but also many producers in Poland, they deliver half products to German buyers, German economy. So do you think that Poland would be hit, or Visegrad countries, like Czech Republic or Slovakia and so on?
I think hit, yes, you will definitely be hit by this. The question isn't so much whether you'll be hit by this, but how you will come out of this. Now, my scenario for Germany is, I don't think Germany will change its economic model. That would require someone wanting to do this. I don't think of any political party in Germany that has this on its agenda. So my scenario for Germany is very rich. Germany can decline for a very long time. It will still be very rich at the end. Not as rich as today, but it will still be okay. So long-term decline is and a slow decline. It's not dramatic. So it's like slower growth. And that means the rest of the world will catch up. Poland will suddenly, at the moment, is it 40% of German GDP levels per capita? By the end, in 20 years, Poland might be 80% of German GDP per capita. But would not see the difference. Poland would probably be better off than East Germany, because policy mistakes have been made, but maybe not as well off as Munich or something. And that would be, a reasonable thing. So what, the effect on Poland would be, yes, if you have any reliance on networks. Network effects are hard to overcome because you've made investments in them. So if, the good, Poland will not be the first country that VW will, move out of, because
of the cheaper labor.
Cheap labor. Yeah. Poland, so it's, I wouldn't think that Poland would be as hit as Germany would be hit, because Germany has expensive factories, and VW, finds it difficult to close them down because of our political problems, and they have to save money elsewhere, and maybe they save money by closing down factories in East Europe. Maybe they find ways of making these German companies more profitable. But ultimately, the medium-term goal for Poland and any of the Visegrad countries would have to be much less reliant on just Germany, and to diversify the risk, and that would be the right strategy for everybody. And I think Poland would be, is a fairly flexible country. It's not. It hasn't created these these sclerotic structures that Germany has created over a very long period of time. It doesn't have hang-ups about technologies. So I think Poland is very sort of agile and nimble, as they say in English. Nimble meaning ability, able to change, able to do things differently. You're much more likely to do that than Germany is. And therefore, I think, in the long run, I mean, the Polish growth rates are still pretty respectable compared to that of Germany. And for as long as the economic policy is sensible, and as long as the country has a degree of freedom and not too much, not moving back towards a planned and managed economy, I think Poland will be all right. But yeah, will there be an effect by this? Yes. Will Trump affect us? Of course, a tariff policy will affect everybody. Hard to say how exactly, because it's so in flux at the moment. But yes, these things will have an effect.
Yeah, I think Poland is completely on the other side of the spectrum than Germany. I mean, you said that Germans are the consensus is very important for you, for journalists, right? And I think in Poland, decision making is very chaotic, so it might be an advantage, but it also might be a flaw. We will see what's the future of our countries. Thank you very much for this very insightful interview. I was talking to Mr. Wolfgang Münchau, the author of the book Kaput, The End of the German Miracle. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And many thanks to our viewers. Goodbye.